Okay, so last time we did author bios and blurbs. This time we are doing titles and book covers. Whether you're self-publishing or traditional publishing, you're going to need to come up with a good title. If you're doing traditional publishing, usually they'll help or just do this for you. But we're going to practice coming up with good titles today because even if you're traditionally publishing, you need to you need to have a query letter or something. And if you already have like an interesting title, they're kind of more likely to be like, oh, that sounds cool. They're good at coming up with titles. They're probably good at writing too. What makes a good title? So first off, it's got to fit the genre. Okay. So if you're writing a fantasy book, you're going to want something that has like magic or dragons or action or like some title that kind of gives off that feel. One idea that people do sometimes, a lot of times, is they'll make their book titles very similar to book titles that are currently popular. So you might have noticed in the last few years, there have been a lot of books with like a court of whatever, or like a throne of whatever, or like a crown of whatever. So there's like this kind of like movement of books that have like a court of whatever, because if you type it into Google, if you start typing in like, oh, my favorite book is like Throne of Glass or whatever, and you start typing in Throne of something, and other books are going to pop up. So it's like an easier way to get people to notice your book if they're looking for this other book that's already popular. So that's one way of doing it. And then, it should imply the main theme of your book. Is it romance, action, adventure? Like your title has to give off this vibe. All right, you want your title to stand out. So even though I just said one idea is to try to copy very similarly other people's, you can do that, but that's not going to make your book super stand out unless you got something really weird or different on there. Try to just like something that's going to pop, something that's going to stand out, something maybe like a little weird or like catchy or unique. Okay, it needs to reflect an important story element. Okay, so a lot of times, I don't know if you guys feel this way, but if you're reading a book and you're like halfway through the book and then you read the title in the book, like I always get a little excited. Like I'm always just like, oh, hey, it's the title of the book right here. Like, that's awesome. Not all of them have the title in the book, but it needs to reflect the story element. So think of words that might describe the theme or like the setting, some element that comes into play. My book is called The Immortal Game. And this kind of like works on a bunch of different levels because they're immortals. They're gods, Greek gods. And then there's like this trial that they have to go through in order to become immortal. So that could be called The Immortal Game. Or the immortals are playing games with each other. There's like this kind of like layers that could work. So, that was a pretty good title. I did not come up with this. Somebody else did. It was really good. And then you want it to roll off the tongue. You don't want super lengthy titles that have a lot of words that don't really flow well together. You kind of best to kind of keep it like short and sweet, or just something easy to say and easy to remember so that, like people will share it with each other and be like, oh, have you read this book? It's kind of difficult if someone's like, oh my gosh, I read this book the other day, but I can't remember the title. It was something about this. It was kind of long. But if you've got like a good 1 or 2 word title that's like catchy and snappy, people are going to be like, oh my gosh, I read this book the other day. It's called this. You should check it out. Here's a bunch of random cool titles that are either like popular or like I think they're kind of good. So Pride and Prejudice, old-timey, really good. 2 words, kind of alliteration, Pride, Prejudice. It's interesting. Fahrenheit 451. I've always liked that one because it's like, what does that mean? Fahrenheit 451. It's a temperature, and then you learn that that's the temperature at which books burn, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's a cool title for this book. Shiver, just 1 word. It's kind of cool. Shiver. Like, ooh, what's gonna happen in this book? I like Six of Crows because like it kind of like connotates like card games, like the 2 of Diamonds or something, and it's the 6 of Crows, but crows is like interesting and different. So that's kind of cool. The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. That one's kind of cool because usually the stars are like, oh, the stars are aligned and fate and destiny, but this one's like, there's something wrong with our stars. The Hobbit, J.R. Tolkien, he made up hobbits. So I'm sure when this first came out, people would be like, what the crap is a hobbit? What is this? This is weird and interesting. So it could just be something that's like, okay, I want to know what this is. This is just like a random book that I read that I liked called Fangirl. Just like if you're a fangirl, if you are a fan of anything, that could be just like, oh, hey, I'm a fangirl. I kind of want to read about other fangirls. I don't know. And then you've got lots of books that have the name of the main character, like Harry Potter and the Percy Jackson and the like all of these books that are kind of like that. So those are kind of just like classic, pretty solid, young adult, middle grade. All right, so now we're going to talk about covers really quick. So they always say, don't judge a book by its cover. Literally, that's what book covers are for. They want you to judge the book by its cover, to look at this cover and be like, ooh, this looks cool. I want to read this book. So here are just like 3 random ones that I found. We've got one on the left that's just like really, really basic and simple, but it like sets a tone that's kind of interesting. And like along with the title, it just kind of works. It's like this, oh, okay, this seems like kind of like some kind of mystery maybe. The middle one's just kind of like cute. And it really matches the title. The Girl's Guide to Hunting and Fishing. So you've got like these like scout patches, badges or something that spell out the title. And it just kind of like, oh, this really works. This really is, you know, bringing in this title, focusing on that. Okay, and then this last one, Darkness Echoes. That's a cool title. And then you've got like these skulls on there, these black roses, these swirls. You can, what genre do you think that book is? Kind of like some like maybe like dark fantasy kind of esque, maybe even historical fiction, but like, yeah, this kind of dark medieval vibe. So the cover of your book is supposed to give off a lot of things. So what makes a book good book cover? Again, it's got to fit the genre, okay? If that book on the end, or like this one in the middle, if I told you, okay, let's stick with the one on the end. If I told you that that book on the end, Witness, was like a romantic comedy, you'd be like, what is this? Somebody did not do their job properly, right? So it's got to fit the genre. You should be able to look at it and be like, oh, this is like has romance in it. This is like going to be a cute, lighthearted book, or like, oh, this is going to be like an epic fantasy book or like a sci-fi book or something. You're going to have, you know, one look to make it really work based on the title and images to figure out what genre it is. And then it has to reflect the tone of the book. So you're going to want to pick colors and images that help kind of let the readers know, okay, is this going to be a romantic comedy? Is this going to be like an action adventure? Is this going to be like a buddy fantasy book? Is this going to be, you know, a children's book about dinosaurs? Is it going to be dark, funny, romantic, cozy? Those kind of things, you need to make sure you have them in there. And then obviously you want it to catch the eye. You want it to be aesthetically pleasing. A lot of times people like doing symmetrical-esque kind of covers. You want things to balance out. Unless you want it to like pop. I mean, you want it to pop anyway, but like you could make it like purposefully like dissonant visually. So it's kind of like, oh, what is this? I kind of want to stare at it longer and try to figure it out. You got to pick images and colors. You want to pick a font for your title and your name and like organize everything so it's very like nicely laid out and like nice to look at, because people will probably spend a lot of time looking at your cover either on a bookstore or like even online, or like if they buy it, it's going to be on their bookshelves for a while. So you want it to be nice. Okay, again, here are some examples. So on the left, Throne of Glass, what kind of vibes are you getting from that book cover? It's probably going to be an action. We got this chick who's decked out in badass clothes, carrying knives. There's some kind of like magic-y swirls going on in the background, and you would be exactly right. Okay, this middle one, 5 feet apart, but just looking at the cover, what do you think of? Romance. We've got lungs on there, so there's probably some something with lungs, probably illness of some kind. The title is Ender's Game, and we've got this dude in his suit. There's like, I don't even know what's going on in the background. You got a sun. If you look closely, this is the Earth. So like, are we in space? There's like weird stuff going on. So we're getting sci-fi vibes. Does it look like they're just gonna have a fun time frolicking around space? No, it looks serious. There's serious things going on here. This dude's about to get into some action in space. So you got to think carefully about what ideas you want to come across in your book cover.